Jenny Lauren Dowden for Conduit News, and today we are joined with Representative Carlton Wing. As many of you know, he is a representative there in the North Little Rock and Sherwood area. Hi, thanks for joining us.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just thinking about it. I believe this is your first time coming on Conduit. Is that right?
It is. It is. I'm a rookie. I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, we appreciate you joining us. We wanted to talk to you about just things that are going on there at the Capitol, but specifically the Arkansas Learns Act. You, of course, have been a proponent of school choice for a long time. You're on the Education House Committee. Talk to us about this bill and what it means and the significance of it for Arkansans.
Well, this is a very exciting day for Arkansas. I mean, people who have been born and raised here, they know what we have gone through for generations of time. For generations, we've really failed our school children. We have been ranked in the 40s and the upper 40s for decades. And so this is an opportunity to really change our trajectory. And this Learns Act is so comprehensive. It's bold, but it's taking known reforms that work and bringing them to Arkansas in a very aggressive way. And this is something that Arkansas needs. When you think about the one item on the legislative agenda that will move the needle the most as far as improvement of quality of life in Arkansas, it's education. And I'm here in Pulaski County. I was raised here in Pulaski County. I remember back in the early 1980s when I was in junior high and high school, it was one of the major national news magazines. I can't remember if it was Time or Newsweek or whatever, but they said that Little Rock was poised to be the new capital city of the South. And I was like, wow, that was great. But they listed all of these things that we had going for us at that time. You had a great climate. You had great access to the major centers across the nation. We had the infrastructure. We had the workforce. And then our education fell apart right there in central Arkansas. And we had lawsuits with trying to seek forced consolidation. We had the crime rate was going up as a result of this failing education system. And all of a sudden, just like that, all of our positive momentum evaporated. So we've been dealing with educational problems for a long time. And it's great to be able to address it in a very powerful way and give our kids and give our families hope for the future and that they can achieve an education that's best suited for them.
Absolutely. You all sat in, I don't know what the record would be for hearing testimony, but it seems like that day, I believe it was Tuesday, I'm sorry, that might have set a record for public testimony. I know that you all heard from supporters of school choice, but there were also a number of people there, whether it be educators, administrators, staff, who just had some real concerns about this bill. Talk to us, if you would. What would you say to those people who are still concerned about this bill? You know, we're still hearing rhetoric like, you know, it's going to defund our public schools, rural schools are going to die, this is a voucher scam. What would you say to those people?
Well, one of the things is, and we had 10 and a half hours total of testimony in that meeting. 7.5 hours was dedicated just to the public response for that, both pro and con, for 7.5 hours. Everybody that signed up to speak had an opportunity to speak if they were still there, and a lot of folks had to leave because of the length of the meeting. But we listened to everybody, and I can say that I sat in my seat for the entire 7.5 hours and listened to every piece of testimony, every pro and every con, every concern that they had. And for the folks who were concerned about it, a lot of them were acting on misinformation. They were concerned about things that actually are not a problem with the bill. And I'll say we can go through several of them, but one of the foremost concerns was we're not going to reward the veteran teachers. That once you hit that $50,000 mark, you're only going to get a $2,000 raise, and then that's it. And that's not true. But that was some of the early information. I don't know if it was purposeful or not, but it was certainly drawing some concern amongst some people, and rightfully so if that was true. That would be true. And I do want to say what we have done is we have raised the minimum pay to $50,000. That is fourth in the country. And when you count cost of living into that, we are the #1 state to come and be a teacher in the nation. We have
Wow.
never ever been close to that
Yeah.
in that ranking. So this is a huge leap forward. And rather than tout that success, what they did was they focused on the fact that in this bill, on that one part of the funding, everybody over $50,000 gets a $2,000 raise. What they were ignoring is that the funding matrix that has existed for a couple of decades, is still intact and still growing. And that's where the step schedule is for the veteran teachers. They will still get raises based on their years of service. And their school district, as always before, will have the opportunity to augment that, enhance that, because they want to recruit the teachers that are going to best meet the needs of their children.
Yeah, and that was one thing that I heard several of you speak about. And then also Secretary Oliva talked about that as well when he introduced this bill. This gives these local school districts the freedom to make adjustments and to set a salary schedule that best suits the teachers' needs as well, which I would think that if it gives more local control to these districts, that would be something that they would be in support of.
Yeah, local control is a big deal, and that's was a big part. You remember last summer when we had that issue came around, is let's give the teachers a raise and let's do it right now.
Yeah.
We actually put a video out on our social media that got shared all over the state to explain the process, and that every 2 years we have an adequacy report that comes out. And we have to respond to the adequacy report for the funding of everything within the schools.
Yeah.
Obviously, teacher salaries is a big part of it, but there are many other parts to the funding pie. And
Yeah.
so if we had jumped the gun before that adequacy report came out, we would have the risk of imbalance, lawsuits, and all kinds of things that could have happened. So we had to do what we have always done, which is every 2 years, readdress the adequacy and then make sure that the funding is proper. And every 2 years for the last 8 years, we have increased funding for teacher salaries in the matrix. Now, that is a funding matrix. It is not a spending matrix. So
Right.
the local districts with their local control have the option to be able to fund other things should they so desire. And sometimes those other things that are funded are perhaps maybe more administrators, which makes it a little top heavy. And that's been a cause of concern. But that's what the local school districts can address. When we mandate the funding, that's when the districts start to push back and say, hey, we have unique needs. I mean, the Bentonville district is going to have unique needs in comparison to Risen, for instance.
Right.
And so that's why that local control is important. But the important thing is the local districts answer to their citizens. And if they're not meeting those needs, then they can address that. But that funding matrix is important for people to understand. And so when we talk about the funding of our veteran teachers, that exists. It continues to exist. There are two pools of money that are providing for these teacher salaries. We created a new pool for the new teachers. That's the $50,000 part. The existing pool is the matrix, and that's what provides the funding for the veteran teachers. And so a lot of the folks who came to testify in committee that were concerned about that and said that we were devaluing the veteran teachers, they didn't understand the facts and the formula. When we've been able to explain that to them, they've understood and they've been okay with that.
Good. In that particular committee meeting, and then also on the House floor Thursday, when you spoke in favor of this bill, one thing that stood out to me that I don't think we've heard a lot of other people say is how this bill embraces individual liberty. And here at Conduit, that's one of the main things that we support, of course, in protecting those liberties and freedom. Talk to us about that perspective that you shared.
Yeah, I think that's really one of the fundamental things in everything that we do in government, but it's certainly embraced in the LEARNS Act is the power of individual liberty, and why that principle is so essential in American government. It's part of the American experience. It's really one of the fundamental reasons of why this nation was created, by a group of people who realized that our individual rights are foremost. We don't answer to a dictator. We don't answer to a king. We answer to ourselves, and we trust and we understand, and we have proven over time that when the individuals are allowed to make the best decision for themselves, when they have the freedom to exercise their rights and go and chase after their dreams, what it does is it creates a system that best meets the needs of all. And
Yeah.
so ingenuity and innovation are encouraged and rewarded in a society like that. And so that's what has brought us amazing products and services. The ability for you and I to talk to
Yeah.
each other right now on the technology that we have came from ingenuity and innovation of people trying to meet a need, and most importantly, having the freedom to do so. And
Yes.
so when we look at this in terms of education, we've got to understand how encapsulating this is, because when we embrace this concept, when people are able to make choices, what happens when people make choices? Good ideas are rewarded and bad ideas are punished. And so
Yeah.
the people who are making bad ideas will say, hey, we need to do something different. I was talking to a superintendent of a public school district in Arkansas who said, you know what we found? And it was a smaller school district. They said, we found that we were losing students because we didn't have a soccer program.
Hmm.
And so they were going to another neighboring school district because they had a soccer team. So you know what
Yeah.
that superintendent did? They said, guess what? We're going to create a soccer program.
Yeah.
That's that's just
Yeah.
a nice little way that you think, okay, I can meet the needs of the people who I'm serving by listening to what they want and making the adjustments. And so this principle of individual liberty, it manifests itself in all aspects of successful American life. It's been proven since 1776, and it's made us the nation that we are, is that we recognize that the best outcomes come from the bottom up, from the individuals up, not from the top down.
And don't you think that's something that really resonates as well with the school districts and with parents? I think for a very long time, parents have felt unheard and a bit discarded when it comes to these public school systems. And in a way, once this happens, public schools, we hope, are going to be more attentive and listening to parents and what they want. And then, right, because for a long time, public schools and the bureaucracy of the teachers unions in these public schools, they have just marched on with their own agenda because they haven't had any accountability or really having to answer to parents. And school choice, this education freedom, throws a big curveball in that.
You bring up a very excellent point. Sometimes the critics of school choice, or those who are concerned about school choice, will say, oh, the good students are going to leave and go to other schools, and then what remains in public schools will be the kids that don't care. But the studies show the opposite. And it's a little counterintuitive at first until you realize what's actually taking place. There's two things that happen. So the remaining school, the kids in the remaining school district, their scores actually go up. And it happens because those school districts are now forced to meet the needs of the students in their school. They make those adaptations, they innovate, they exercise some ingenuity, and they meet those needs. But then also, their funding that comes from federal funding and your property taxes still remains with the public schools. What people are saying, that money that's leaving is just the state funding, but they still get the federal and the local funding. They have more funds for the students that remain, which allows those students to get even more attention and more resources dedicated to them. So the studies are clear that the students who remain are in an improved school district and their scores actually go up. Everybody lifts up.
That's wonderful. Okay, we know that this will soon go back to the Senate and then to the governor's desk. And then from there, talk to us just very briefly about what it will look like when it then goes to rules.
Yeah, so they're obviously with a 144-page bill. The next procedure is to go through, the rulemaking process, and that's when you start to implement. Okay, what does this look like? And so there's going to be a lot of activity on that. I can tell you, for the folks who are saying this is too big, too complex, Governor Sanders has made this her number one agenda item. This was the number one thing that she campaigned on. This was the number one piece of her legislative agenda. There is no way that this is going to fail. We are all together on this to make sure that this is implemented correctly and that all the voices are heard. And I should say, all the voices were heard in the creating of this bill. We listen to educators, we listen to superintendents. On the educators piece, I mean, people seem to be glossing over the fact this historic teacher pay raise that came from listening to the educators and what we needed to do to build up education in Arkansas. Once again, we are the #1 destination for new teachers, and for the first half of their career, the #1 destination in the country. And then the veteran teachers, as we mentioned before, have that same step schedule as well. We are among the highest paying states in the nation for teachers.
It's so exciting. It really is. Before we let you go, I want to just briefly talk about additional legislation. Are you working on anything specifically? And, you know, we talked about this earlier. We're halfway through the session. And is there anything out there that you think needs to be picked up by the legislature that's not out there already?
Well, you know, the next item on the agenda, we're going to be talking about taxes, about income taxes specifically. We've been pretty aggressive in the state of Arkansas addressing that piece to the financial puzzle. You know, a couple of terms ago, we were 7% was our top rate. We have cut that down to 4.9. And we've also brought our corporate tax down to 5.3. We're looking to bring both of those down a little bit more with the stated goal of getting to a 0% personal income tax. And let's talk about that, because that's a huge task, but it is a worthy goal. And it's something that I brought up a few terms ago, is if we could get to 0% income tax, there's a few things that happen there. Aside from the marketability, people choose states to live in based on personal income tax. Arkansas, as we mentioned before, back in the 80s, all those still things that make us the capital city of the South, the capital state of the South, still exist. And so if we can really capitalize on that and bring people to this state, you know, the fourth item on Governor Sanders' agenda is outdoors recreation, because she knows that will bring in tourism dollars that will very much benefit the state of Arkansas. But when we talk about getting down to 0%, you need to understand the historic significance of that. No state has ever done that before. All the states that are 0% now started out that way and just kept, everybody else just fell off the wagon at one point or the other. And so for us to be able to get back to a 0% would be a significant leap, but it's a worthy goal and it'll take some time.
Well, I think if there ever was a time to do it, that heavy lifting, you all have shown that you can pass the hard things. So why not take that up now and get it done before April?
That sounds great. Yeah, I tell you, just going back to the LEARNS Act and the heavy lift that was, I've been this is my 4th term in the House of Representatives, and term after term, we would fail in our goals of getting very modest school choice proposals out there to benefit our kids. And we got a small one in the last term. It was a small bill, but it was a start. But to be able to sit there and see 78 yes votes on the floor of the House yesterday was great. It was great for the people of Arkansas. It was great for the less fortunate in Arkansas, because this bill is specifically about them. Because wealthy people have always had school choice. They've always had the ability to move to another school district. They can afford tutors. They can afford private schools. They can afford to do homeschool. But those in the lower incomes are stuck in a zip code, and sometimes they feel like they are sentenced to a school rather than attending a school. This gives everyone an opportunity to get a better education, and that's what school choice is all about.
Well, we really thank you for the work that you've done on school choice and the other representatives who supported it. We are grateful, and thank you so much for joining us on Conduit. I hope that you come back again.
I would love to. I really appreciate what you do, the messages that you get out, because as people become more educated in the process, they find out what's true, and then that helps us all make better decisions. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you. Take care.
All right, you too.